Hello and welcome to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from behind the scenes of the Avalanche Summit in London. I'm Jen Sanasi here with my co-host Sam Ewan. Sam, we are here for day 2.
We are.
We had fish and chips last night. We are in London. We're doing it all. Talk to me about some of the highlights. What did you walk away from yesterday with?
I thought yesterday was great. We talked to a lot of people. I was really fascinated with talking to Nikhil from JP Morgan, just how much they're committed into the ecosystem right now. You know, JP Morgan's one of those that we always hear in crypto about the idea of like Jamie Dimon doesn't like Bitcoin and whatever, but they're building so much. I think there's like 300 engineers, last I heard, all trying to figure out digital assets in the JP Morgan ecosystem. So I thought that was a good conversation. Emmen, of course, brought it. He told us all the sort of highlights of his keynote, which he then delivered on. I loved talking about Napster and LimeWire and the kind of...
You love talking about Napster
anything,
and LimeWire.
Anything old school technology is my thing. Also, Jen, the grounds we're on are just stunning. So after we finished, we wrapped filming, we did a little bit of a walk around, went to the wellness area. Mm-hmm. We saw some performers. There was a woman dancing with a cage on her head. It was wild. What about you?
Well, I mean, we are at Hatfield House. It is a historic site. We learned yesterday that this is where Queen Elizabeth I lived for some time, was her family home. So a lot of history here. So that's been really interesting. I want to build off of what you said, having Emmen here and just learning about his scientific background. He comes from academia. He's really thinking thoughtfully about this space, and to know that he was thinking about tokenization before the Bitcoin paper was even written, or the Bitcoin white paper, sorry, this was really fascinating to hear. I had not heard Emmen's backstory before. I had not heard the Avalanche origin story. So that was really interesting. And I'm really excited, as you know, for talking about gaming today. We have the Chief Business Officer of MapleStory coming on the show later. One of the biggest gaming IPs out of Korea recently launched their blockchain version of their game on Avalanche. And just really curious how legacy brands like that are thinking about integrating crypto into gaming, especially since gaming audiences haven't really been super receptive to crypto elements. So really interested in hearing about that later today.
Yeah, I think the gaming narrative is one we've talked about a lot. We spoke a lot about at Consensus too. I will say that I think that the press and the media, of which we are, sometimes overblow the challenges within blockchain gaming. And I say that because most of the large gaming platforms right now have their own marketplaces. People can resell assets, right? We'll hear about, like a Counter-Strike skin going for $500,000, or something in Fortnite, being resold. I don't think that it's that far away. I think that people are just wary of the idea of the over-financialization. How does that take away from gameplay? Mm-hmm. And the fact is, when you think of Gunzilla, when you think of MapleStory, if you're making a great game, people are going to come play anyway. And so that's the thing we haven't actually had in Web3 games for a while, which is these really great games. We're starting to get them now.
I agree with you completely. A lot of the elements of crypto are already in gaming. I think it's just the word NFTs, the word blockchain. As it starts to fall into the background, I think it makes crypto gaming maybe a little bit more accessible.
It's going to get there.
It's going to get there. All right. You'll just have to wait and see later on the broadcast what we discover when it comes to crypto gaming. We're going to bring in our first guest now today, Crypto in America host, Eleanor Terrett. Hello.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, you have been at the conference, obviously, since yesterday. What have some of the highlights been for you?
Well, obviously the grounds. So beautiful, and the historic nature. I had no idea that Queen Elizabeth I grew up here, and she actually learned that she was going to be queen here when her sister Mary died. So much history, and I'm looking forward to taking the tour later. Other things, we interviewed Emmen yesterday, live on stage, and he actually told us about his debanking story. He told us that he was debanked, and unsurprising now as these debanking stories have come out, and much more of a, seems to be a very widespread thing, at least it was a couple of years ago. He was debanked by KeyBank. He actually said that on stage. So that was very interesting. And also, you mentioned, Jen, his very technical background, right? He comes from Cornell. Mm-hmm. He was just sort of this like tech whiz that saw potential in blockchain technology. So I feel like he really is sort of one of these people. He's not a crypto bro, as it were, by any means, but he's just a very smart technical guy who sees the potential of blockchain and of crypto. And something that was interesting last night, we had a dinner and Emmen was there. And I'd always thought of Avalanche when I covered my previous job, covered more policy as opposed to just like diving into like some of these like, these chains, right? The Avalanches, the Solanas. I said I've always put Avalanche together with gaming, and you guys just mentioned gaming, right? And they're like, oh no, like we don't want to just pigeonhole ourselves into that like gaming aspect. But like just for me coming from sort of like trad media, as it were, I always had this image of Avalanche as a gaming chain, but it's actually so much more. And I learned yesterday, there's way more going on than just gaming on Avalanche. So I've learned a lot so far. It's been a great day, and I'm looking forward to the rest of today and tomorrow.
I'm really interested in the conversation when we spoke with him, and I don't know if this came up on stage, but he mentions doing all of this work in really 2001, 2002 after 9/11, and then he said he kind of abandoned it for a while, and then Bitcoin and the rise of digital assets kind of brought him back in.
Yep.
And we were having this conversation about how anyone who was working in the space of sort of flexible money, like in borderless money, was sort of told not to do this right after 9/11. The idea that it would encourage terrorism, which has been a narrative in crypto.
Right, still is.
For decades now. But I wonder what would have happened if 9/11 hadn't happened in that respect.
Right.
If this all would have advanced earlier. Because you almost needed 9/11, you almost needed the financial crisis of 2008 to bring out Bitcoin into where it was. Because there were projects before that, as we know. So I'm really interested in his background and learning more about that with him.
He said that on stage too. He said, I think we are behind now where we could have been had that not happened. He said there's projects that we were thinking about that could have been miles ahead of where they are today. So just thinking about what life events, what regulators, a small subset of government officials can do to one massive sector is it's pretty crazy to think about.
Eleanor, are there other areas that you think that Avalanche is doing good work in? I know for me, the idea of these really flexible L1s that anyone can create, and their team really supports just so many L1s coming out, and L1s for very specific use cases. That's one that I'm really interested in. Is there other stuff that you heard about that was like, oh, this is something I want to learn more about?
Well, I thought it was interesting during his speech. He said, we've been sort of the chain, the welcoming chain, right? Like I can never say that word, interoperability. But now we're trying to focus on us as a chain, on Avalanche. So I feel like there's going to be much more building, much more growing just on the main chain, which will be something, probably to watch. But that stood out to me yesterday. But I like everything that they're doing. In full transparency, I came from a big media outlet and covered mostly policy and regulation. So in this new role of mine at Crypto in America, I'm getting to learn a lot more about the DeFi side of things, the different chains, what they're doing, the decentralization, the blockchain. So I'm still learning. I think myself is learning on the fly pretty much every day, but I love it. It's very interesting.
I want to draw on your background covering policy, legislation, regulation in the United States. We talked a lot about it here yesterday. Of course, we had the stablecoin vote earlier this week. I know you were covering. I think you were up at like 3 a.m. covering it.
Guilty. Yep.
And like Sam mentioned, we had a lot of conversations here about institutional adoption, about stablecoins, real-world assets that I think this legislation is really going to pave the way for when it comes to financial institutions in the U.S. Really starting to experiment in this space. Talk to me a little bit about what you're watching and what you think is going to happen with stablecoin legislation this year, and more broadly, the market structure bill.
So today we have a vote 4 hours from now about will be the motion to proceed. So what we had on Monday was basically the motion to proceed on the motion to proceed. So very technical. And today we have the the motion to proceed to start debate and amendment process on the floor for the Genius Act. So what you can expect today, if that vote passes, and judging on Monday's vote, it probably will. Never say never, but most likely we'll see a lot of amendments from certain senators. So I know Senator Ted Cruz is trying to put his anti-CBDC rider in there. There's from Dick Durbin and I forget the other senator's name. They're trying to put their credit card, and I'm forgetting all the names now, but basically like credit card, they want to expand out from the two major credit card companies to like have better, like a more level playing field for credit card companies, and then also to protect consumers from like those massive like service fees. So they're basically trying to insert this rider into the Genius bill. It's getting a lot of pushback. Consumers want it, obviously, because we pay less, right? Big banks don't want it, and senators don't really want to have to choose between like the big banks and the public, right? Like how are we going to choose that? So that's going to be something to watch. If it gets in, if it passes, I'm not sure it will. But bottom line is that we're watching for quite a few amendments. Trump's crypto venture conflicts of interest will definitely be something to watch on the floor, and also any AML additions. So all that to say, today's going to be a busy day, and we could see maybe a final vote before. I think it's looking more likely after Memorial Day at this point. But then we get right into market structure, right? And then August is the deadline, like right before August recess. I think August recess starts August 1st. So we're counting down those days. Are we going to make it? I don't know. It'll be something that I'm asking my panelists today, my legal panelists. I'm going to be like, what's your take? Are we going to get it through?
I look forward to talking to you later, because one of your panelists, I saw them in the lineup for coffee this morning, and I said, do you think we're going to get market structure this year? And he said yes, which was kind of the opposite of what I heard from most of the legal experts I spoke to at Consensus. So I will find you later to find out what the insights are.
Yeah, I'll give you an update.
All right. All right, we're going to take a quick break now. We'll be right back.
Can monetize directly in app.
But it's honest work.
Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from the Avalanche Summit in London. We were just joined by Crypto in America host Eleanor Terrett, and now Avalab's Chief Business Officer John Nahas joins us backstage. Hello.
Hi, good to be with you guys.
Good to have you here. Now, in our last conversation, we were talking about the narratives we hear in the media about Avalanche. One really strong one last year was gaming. Now we're hearing a lot about institutions, stable coins. Talk to me as the chief business officer, what Avalanche is really focused on as we head into the second half of the year.
So I think, we've had strengths, and particularly last year, given the known regulatory environment, we had a big push on the enterprise side, on the institutional side. On the enterprise side, particularly with gaming, there was a need. And that aligned also with our technical roadmap. So, we had this ability to launch Avalanche L1s, which were previously called subnets. And at the time, we were only allowed for permissioned public or permissioned private use cases, which inevitably are ideal for government, for institutional, and for business use cases. Now, with the upgrades that we had at the end of last year, we have more public permissionless chains coming. Effectively for us, it's not as much a industry focus as much as highlighting use cases. So the industries that we focus on, or the verticals that we have, would be institutional capital markets, enterprise and consumer, gaming, crypto native, DeFi, as well as AI, DePIN, and all these other use cases. But additionally, I think where we're different and we stand out is we took a more global approach about 2 years ago with local heads. So we're strong in Korea, Japan, India, the Middle East, primarily the UAE and Saudi, expanding in LATAM and other places as well. So effectively for us and for me in my seat and for our team, it's highlighting amazing use cases within different industries in different jurisdictions and showing how Avalanche's technology allows for that interplay and interoperability between them. Our ultimate goal is switching from initially highlighting applications to highlighting different chains or different ecosystems and how that interoperability between them works.
John, I'm interested in your role as a CBO. you talk about use cases, you talk about verticals, we talk about experiments a lot in crypto. When do you think you have made it in any of those? What's the KPI, the measurement that you're utilizing to say, okay, we've achieved what we want to here, and now we are going to continue to build?
So I think some of our competitors look at it differently. I think some are fantastic at the top-down approach, which it usually means you get a headline, they talk about it, and then they use that to get another headline, and they build upon a narrative. But the adoption doesn't happen. Others are doing really well from the bottom up, focusing solely on developers. I like to think we need to do both. We need some high-level kind of validation and authority and credibility that comes with that, which inspires the developers and the innovators to build from the bottom up. For us, what matters would be number of chains deployed, number of users, number of transactions, but also transactions between chains, which is what we're building towards. But to do that, we need to fill up all the verticals with different use cases, build that together. We are focused for a long time on bringing real use cases, real adoption, and real businesses on chain. I think that is what's sustainable. I think that's why 4.5 years into this journey on Avalanche, we're, I think, at the precipice of a next major leg up for the network and for adoption in the space in general. If I had tried to time it this well, I don't think I could have. So a little bit of luck goes a long way. We've been kind of happy to see the industry shift towards adoption, utility, real use cases. I mean, there's only so many narrative cycles that we can continuously as an industry go through over and over that is just speculative. You burn people out that way. You burn out users. You don't get that adoption. And this technology is transformative, and it should be used for good. And it could be used in a way that I think drives just better outcomes, better use cases, better things. My North Star is for a killer app to be built. I don't know what it is, because if I did, I'd probably be building it myself. My job is to enable innovators to build great things. And we haven't had that aha moment where, I think social media for Web 2 or email for Web 1, we haven't had that thing that people just use and love to use. And it just happens to be on blockchain. I know that's cliche, and blockchains arrive when you don't know you're using it. Well, right now, this industry is so focused on always putting the blockchain in your face, right? Like when you log into Netflix, it doesn't say Netflix powered by AWS. But I think we've seen first, second, and third generation blockchains in terms of technology over the course of many years that are incrementally better, that are faster or cheaper or whatever, right? Focused. I think we're still stuck in a first generation blockchain business. And what I mean by that is we just keep reinventing more and more general purpose blockchains. General purpose chains that are supposed to do everything, right? AI and DePIN and payments and meme coins and DeFi and like the world is not built that way. So I think we're kind of still in the AOL moment, I like to call it. I'm old enough to remember AOL, where you log in and see everything on one page. Blockchains aren't that difficult anymore. I think what we're showing is that you can proliferate blockchains, kind of like WordPress did for websites or Shopify did for e-commerce. Different companies are going to need their own chains. Different businesses are going to need their own chains. Different use cases are going to need their own chains. So it's a shift in the way I think people think about the industry. When a chain's product is not only its token, but it's what it enables. And we're really seeing a lot of adoption here, and particularly with Summit this week, a lot of builders across a lot of industries, a lot of geographies are here. And these are, seasoned professionals or innovators that are trying something new.
Based on what you just said, I'm curious about the future you envision. Are we building towards a future where the layer ones we see today consolidate, or is it a future where we see way more layer ones for very specific use cases attached to very specific businesses?
I think there should be a consolidation. I like to say that the problem in the industry is there's too many blockchains and too much block space, particularly general purpose. So I do think some need to go away. A lot actually need to go away or consolidate. But at the same time, we don't have enough blockchains and block space, meaning it needs to proliferate. But for specific businesses, like I don't envision a world where every bank doesn't have their own chain for intra-bank settlement. And then all these chains connect to other bank chains. And now you have a settlement network a la Swift, but on chain. The same with enterprises, the same with payments networks, the same with everything else. So I envision a world where there's thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not more blockchains. I just think we've been focusing on this world that prioritizes the narrative, that prioritizes in the short term a token, and the innovation stops, right? The need to innovate and really deliver is kind of taken away from these guys. But if you can proliferate blockchains that have interoperability, that have customizability, right? Right now, it's like, here's my chain, fit your problem, fit your business into my solution. Again, it's cliche, but we just keep reinventing the same wheel in this industry. We need to look at a different path. Like, why are we not giving every single bank their own chain? Why are we not giving every municipality or state or government their own chain, right? Like, I wrote this whole thread once about, like, when Elon was talking about Doge and government stuff, like, every government office should have their own chain. And you can just, it could be permissioned, but publicly viewed. Banks and regulated financial entities need privacy. We're delivering on the privacy front. AvaCloud from Avalabs just did that yesterday. So I think the things that make the industry better, or the tools that are needed, haven't been really built that much, and they're starting to be now. And I think we're going to see a lot more chains. I envision a world in potentially where every one of us has our own chain, where that chain holds your identity, your records, your assets, and whatever else it is.
We talked about Samcoin yesterday, so now we have Samchain, powered by Samcoin.
There you go.
Well, and I also think, to your point, the idea that in a world in the future of AI, where we might want to say everything that we are putting out there that could be trainable is actually owned by us.
Yes.
Having your own chain makes a lot of sense.
Your chain would have your own agent. Your agent would act upon your behalf. You could set parameters for it. You know, you can start to see a world, and I talked about this yesterday in my keynote, where you can start to digitize and tokenize things that currently are not there. And this is kind of like your attention, right? Your opinions, you know, your reputation, your data, whatever it may be. And we're bringing some new companies on chain that are looking to do certain things this way. So it's exciting to see what comes next.
John, I want to dive into something you said specifically around, let's say, banks having their own chains. I remember, and I'm also old enough to know these things too, it's like we had the AOLs, we then got the Facebooks. At some point, software became a lot of middleware, right? It was really the translation software. Do you envision, as all of these chains pop up, let's even make the assumption they're all L1s on Avalanche, that they inherently have that translation ability built in? Because one bank's going to do it their way, another bank's going to do it their way. One's settling in euros, another one's settling in dollars. Or is this actually an opportunity for those to build who really are looking at this omni-chain world and just saying anything can just plug in as long as we know the data set, that we then can translate it? Again, maybe that's where AI comes in. How does the idea of like middleware work on the blockchain?
So I'll talk first about on the Avalanche side, right? I think Avalanche was built from the ground up with this thesis in mind, that you need to have interoperability between as many chains as possible, and it doesn't all have to be the same virtual machine. So currently, all Avalanche L1s are EVM based, but we have some that are coming that are not. They have customizable virtual machines. We should have a salon of virtual machines and move virtual machine chains and all these working together, and we have that interoperability layer. I think currently it's just way too siloed, the way it's been, and you have to rely on third-party bridges, right? And third-party bridges, they have their own incentives, and different chains have their own incentives to not want users to leave. Middleware, I think, is what's been missing. We have too much infrastructure on the bottom and a lot of speculative kind of applications on the top, but not enough people like building that middleware, to your point, of like picks and shovels and the roads. We're building a lot of cities. And we're building a lot of cool stuff in these cities, but we don't have enough roads, we don't have enough plumbing, we don't have enough electrical wiring going around, to make an analogy there. I think it's really important, and I don't think the financial incentive has been there so much, because who's going to fund that, right? Like a layer one network's not going to want to fund that. VCs are aligned oftentimes with certain networks, so it doesn't really give that incentive to open this thing up and connect things and let things flow freely. We have a network that allows that, but would love to see more innovation on that front.
Earlier in our conversation, you were talking about this focus on regions and what's happening in the region. Last Avalanche Summit was in Buenos Aires. We were there broadcasting live. This time we're in London. When you look at the regions that Avalanche is focused on, where you're having the your builder communities, the incubators happening. Which one is the most exciting for you? Where is the bustling development happening?
So I have 3 kids at home.
Okay.
And if you ask me to pick one of my favorite, I could not tell you.
I was going to ask you to pick a favorite use case.
I can't.
Lucky.
I can't pick a favorite region. Each one is so different, and that actually underpins why we did this. Emmen and John Woo came to me and they were like, "We want to expand the team. What do you think?" And look, technology is global, but business is local. What works in the U.S. doesn't necessarily work in even Canada, right? And what works in Japan doesn't work in Korea, and vice versa. Different regions have different compliance and regulatory concerns, but they have different builders and different users and just different things. So I'll highlight some of the great stuff that we do. I know in Korea, we've done fantastic work with enterprise and with gaming. In Japan, institutional work, most recently with Sumitomo Mitsui and Konami. Turkey, we have a very big developer community, more crypto native community payments. The Middle East, we're doing a lot in Saudi and the UAE around payments, remittance, cross-border, institutional. LATAM, a lot of payments again. So it's a little bit of everything. What's exciting to me is seeing how these connect. So especially with our Asia team, I know our Singapore team is working very closely with our Japan team and our Korea team, and we're doing some stuff there. We have XSGD, which is a Singapore dollar. They've been doing remittances and payments between enterprises with Hong Kong, so we're looking to establish a bigger presence in Hong Kong as well. So it's kind of like the regions are doing BD with each other, which is kind of cool because like 2 of my country leads or regional leads will like connect on an idea and then connect 2 people between each other. That's ultimately our job, is to facilitate and connect people and ideas and capital and developers to really help.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us
My
behind
pleasure.
the scenes at the summit.
Awesome.
That was Ava Labs Chief Business Officer John Nahas. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are joining you from the Avalanche Summit that is currently underway in London. This is the premier gathering for visionaries shaping the future of blockchain and Web3. We are now joined backstage by Dragonfly managing partner and founder Haseeb Qureshi. Hello, great to see you again.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Avalanche Summit. We're here in London. Talk to us about how you're looking at the Avalanche ecosystem. I know you participated in a pretty big round at the end of last year.
That's right. So we've been actually long-time investors in Avalanche. I seeded Avalanche, 2018? So a long, long time ago. I've known this team for a very long time. It's amazing. I mean, it's easy to lose sight of, but it's amazing to have seen an ecosystem grow from a tiny little startup into like having an entire crazy event like this. I think we're like on the Hogwarts campus or something. It's kind of a bizarre experience.
Queen Elizabeth the First's childhood home.
Is that right?
Yes.
I had no idea. All I could see was like Harry Potter snippets as I was walking around this place. It does feel, it feels like an Emily Bronte novel walking around here. I've never been to a place like this. And I can only imagine how difficult it is to book out and create a whole immersive experience like we have here. So it's really cool, but candidly, Avalanche at this point is such a big ecosystem that even as a VC, I can't really get my arms around everybody who's building in the space. So I walk around, I'm talking to people. I just ran into the MapleStory team who got spun out from Nexon, and some of the other people. Them I knew, because obviously it's a very big name and they had a big splash with launching their token last week. But with a lot of these other groups, I just I had no idea that people from over here were building on Avalanche. That's really cool. So it does feel like crypto at this point is moving so fast. Even as a VC, I can't keep my arms around the whole
Is
thing.
this like a 1% story? I mean, like you seeded Avalanche way back when. You come to this event, Avalanche has become such a big ecosystem. How often does this happen for you as a VC?
I mean, it's not that common. I mean, Avalanche is like basically like a top 10 token at this point. So obviously there's not a lot of those. But it is a feeling that I have every once in a while as a VC of seeing kind of, you see a little baby turn into a big, like grow up in front of you. And it's always a very somewhat crazy yet also nostalgic feeling of, oh man, I remember I was just talking about this to somebody else earlier today that, when I saw the seed round pitch for Avalanche, it was not what it is today, right? It was so completely different than what it ended up becoming. And when you're investing in it, whether it's a founder or a startup or an ecosystem, the thing you're realizing is that you're not really betting on the idea that someone is literally telling you, because all ideas evolve. All startups change and iterate and respond to the stimuli, because the crypto industry moves so fast that there's no way what you're going to end up building is the same thing you started building. And so I'll tell you, the seed round of Avalanche, when I originally met Goon, we were in a coffee shop in San Francisco, and what he was pitching me was that I'm going to take this Avalanche consensus protocol, which they still use. I'm going to take this Avalanche consensus protocol, and I'm going to use it to create forks of every blockchain. So I'm going to create a fork of Bitcoin called Avalanche Bitcoin, a fork of Ethereum called Avalanche Ethereum, a fork of Zcash called Avalanche Zcash, XRP. I'm going to go down the list and create a shadow version of each of these chains. That was the original pitch, which obviously is batshit insane. But I was like, that is so aggressive and ambitious. Why not? Let's try it. And of course, that's not what they ended up doing, right? They ended up adapting to the fact that smart contracts blew up, Ethereum became this really big thing. They built the C chain, and then it expanded into subnets, which are now L1s. And so this is the story of almost every startup, is that you respond to the market as the market evolves in front of you. And what you're betting on when you bet on a founder is you're betting on that repeated process of iteration and action, reaction, evolution, all that stuff, because crypto's changed so much. Right? Is that if you were still building the same thing you were building in 2017, you'd be building some ghost IoT chain that was designed for ICO. Obviously you would not be doing that if you're still responding to the way in which the world has changed between now and then. So that most of all is what's heartening to see, is the way in which, I ran into some founders that I remember running into back in 2018. And all of them, you see the way in which they've learned and responded and evolved as founders. That's what's most, I think, motivating to see as an investor.
Take us back to 2018 and maybe compare it to 2025. What has changed about founders? Have they learned how to pitch to you better? Is there a sort of secret sauce that you're looking for that now someone else is looking and throwing that into ChatGPT and say, how do I get Dragonfly to invest?
Oh God, I hope that's not true, but I'm sure it is. I'd say in 2018 there was a lot more opacity in a pitch, right? So back then, somebody would pitch you, and the main goal was to just kind of be so confusing and to have so many...
Sounds smart.
Yeah, right? Extremely large buzzwords that is kind of like, oh man, this must be really big. And that was kind of the vibe in 2018, because the reality is that a lot of people were investing in a lot of stuff they didn't really understand. And there was a sense that there's this penumbra that is bigger than what any of us understands, that what crypto is going to be someday, what ICOs are going to be someday. And that was the heyday of ICOs. Today, what I look for in a great pitch, and I think increasingly what founders understand, is that they need to master their domain. They need to really understand it in and out. They need to have really strong and robust answers about how does your mechanism work? What's your go-to-market? What's the unit economics of this product or this protocol? So those things, I think people increasingly realize they actually need to own the details. In 2018, it was kind of the opposite, is that the more detail-oriented you are, the less inspirational the pitch is, and as a result, the harder I can see the ICO to run. So that maybe is some of the difference between today and yesteryear. But most of all, I think people also realize that you can't kind of go into the deep end of the pool unless you really, really know what you're doing. Right? So increasingly today, I think I see a lot more grounded pitches than I saw in 2018, where today, you see something about MEV infrastructure. You see something about, okay, I'm going to build some kind of fintechy type app that's going to offer stablecoins. People say, okay, I can see that sounds like it would work. Or at least I can see the path to a go-to-market. Whereas, in 2018, somebody's building something for, self-driving truck automation using blockchains. It's like, okay, we don't have self-driving trucks. We don't have, like blockchains that can work well in transit. But I'm sure those will all be done by the time your ICO launches. So that was very much the energy of what it was like back then. And now people are a lot more grounded.
At Consensus, which we just came from, I spoke to Jake Bruckman from Coin Fund, and he said the advice he would give people who are pitching VCs is to focus more on their founder stories. I'm curious what your advice would be. Is it that, to focus on your story? Because like what you're saying, the company's going to change. You're going to iterate a bunch, but you need that VC to really believe in you and where you came from.
So it's true that I pay a lot of attention to your founder story. That being said, if you spend a lot of your time telling me your founder story, I'm going to mostly think you're kind of vain. Like the people who have really, really good founder stories, they generally don't spend all their time telling you what amazing people they are. It's just like it's almost like inversely correlated with how impressive they actually are. So I would say it's good to have a good founder story, but you probably shouldn't be hitting on it too hard. Sort of let me come to you with respect to, okay, you've got an interesting story, you've got an interesting background. Mostly what I want to focus on is what you're doing and what, like if you have hard accomplishments, great. But for the most part, like what I want to see is your competence emerge through your mastery of the thing that you're actually building or you're actually working on, right? And I'd say the pitches to me that convey the most mastery are the ones that are in a way the least structured and the most like teaching me, right? If you are kind of clicking through a PowerPoint step by step, I did this, here's my background, here's the mission statement, here's this. Those pitches I think tend to be the weakest because it really feels like, okay, this person's very wooden and kind of rehearsed their way through this thing that they've practiced in front of a mirror. Whereas the founders who have the most experience and are the most, again, in control, for them it's really like, hey, what do you know about this thing? Okay, great. And it becomes a conversation. And those types of founders who really feel like, okay, this person is actually a master. This person really, really understands MEV infrastructure or fintech or whatever it is. And I feel like I'm not sitting here watching a book report, but I'm instead like exploring this thing with this person. Those pitches tend to be the best.
It sounds to me that, I spend a lot of time with artists these days, a lot more crypto artists, and the ones who are, the chain doesn't matter to them, whether AI is in or not, they just love the idea of creating, and they're going to create no matter what.
Right.
And so they know their craft so well that they're able to sort of express their craft in whatever medium possible. So it sounds like great founders are almost artists who are able to weave a great narrative, a great story, who they are, but also cohere it together to something that you can walk towards and say, I identify with this.
Exactly. And much like artists, great founders are obsessive. Like you get them running on their thing and they'll just keep going and going and going in like arbitrary levels of detail. And you kind of want, that little, that twinge of autism, where it's just kind of like, okay, this person has gone way too deep on this particular thing. And I just want to know, I can't keep up with you, when we're talking about MEV infrastructure, but I want to know that you can go there. Because if you have, that really means to me that you're steeped in this thing, and it's kind of infused everything that you're doing. And that, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to succeed, but it is one of the prerequisites to succeeding is knowing your craft better than anybody else can, such that, if that's the thing that we're competing on, nobody can win against you. That might not mean, it's still difficult to like get the go-to-market down, get the marketing down, get the capital together, all that stuff. It's all hard. It's not easy for anybody, even if you've got a very impressive background. But the more you own it, the easier it's going to be for you to sail through.
All right, Haseeb, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Some great advice for founders there. That was Dragonfly managing partner and founder Haseeb Qureshi. All right, we're going to take a quick break. We will be right back.
You can monetize directly in-app.
But it's honest work.
welcome back to the show. You are watching CoinDesk Live, and we are coming to you from the Avalanche Summit in London. We are at the historic Hatfield House, where top visionaries in blockchain and Web3 have gathered to share insights, alpha, and ideas. Our next guest joins us now, President and CEO of MeWe, Jeffrey Edel. Hello.
Thank you.
Well, okay, let's get right into it. I know that this is one of Sam's special interest topics. We're talking about decentralized social. Talk to us about your vision for MeWe.
So it's interesting. MeWe is a Web 2 platform. And so we come from a Web 2 world, which is a completely different way of going about jumping into blockchain. So we spent about 8 years in that Web 2 world. MeWe is a privacy-based entity, if you will. We're what people don't even know. We have 21 million users on platform right now, and we literally have just around 2 million that have signed up on the blockchain. So we are the largest decentralized social media platform, bigger than Lens and Farcaster and Arena together. So our vision is that what we did was we made a deal with Avalanche to create an L1 on Avalanche and to launch something called a Soshi coin, which is our own utility, our own token, if you will, and that'll be able to do the finance side of things on platform.
So, Jeffrey, there's been a lot of talk over decentralized social in the last bunch of years. You already have 2 million folks on. How many of them know they're on blockchain?
Well, that's the key to all of this, is that the blockchain world, have I found it over the last 3 years, because I don't come from this world at all. I'm the ex-chairman of MySpace when it started. So I come from social media and I come from entertainment and television, but I don't come from blockchain. People that are not in this incestuous blockchain world or crypto world is a very small community. So we try to make it, though, that they don't know they're on the chain. And when it comes to onboarding and so forth, they literally go through a protocol that's through Polkadot, if you will, and that gets them validated and allows them to attach and assign a social graph to them, because the concept is portability. And then once they're into MeWe itself, now they're over on Avalanche. They don't even know that. And we have a test net running right now, but on Avalanche, that's when they're going to utilize the Soshi coin. And we also want to have embedded wallets. So again, it's not the kind of thing where you need a 50-digit code and you have to deal with all that. And I think that's probably the biggest obstacle to adoption, is the fact that you have to attract a mainstream audience, you have to speak to them in the mainstream language.
The social platforms that succeed end up with very habitual behaviors, right? I'm addicted to TikTok. I'm just scrolling my feed or going through Reels, or I'm constantly writing on Twitter. What is it about MeWe that makes it sort of special and work?
Well, the beauty of MeWe and the power of MeWe comes from our communities and our groups. We have 750,000 plus groups on MeWe. So you, whatever, you can come up with a great idea. I want to do climbing. I want to do wine in Tuscany, whatever it is. And you will create your own group, become an administrator in your own group, and then build that group. And blockchain will be wonderful, and our Soshi token will be wonderful as well, because people will be able to mint NFTs, NFTIs groups, etc. But it's really the power of the groups and the communities that's all about MeWe.
You know, as the former chairman of MySpace, I think you know this, but social media is all about virality. It's all about getting your friends to be in the same place you are. How do you think about grabbing that audience, grabbing that attention, and competing with the Facebooks and the TikToks that have billions of users already on the platform?
Great question. So when I first came on board, I had to come up with the vision for MeWe. MeWe had been around for about 8 years. It would add several thousand people every day. It was, at the time when I walked in the door, more politically motivated, and I wanted it to be more ubiquitous, something where it wasn't political, it was culture, it was lifestyle, it was family, it was all of that together, entertainment. So I looked around, and I know that back in the MySpace days when we sold to News Corp, Chris DeWolf and Tom, your best friend, went over there. I did not go. Our clocks were cleaned by Facebook because we got caught in a large organization. So what's happening in the MySpace world, I looked at it, or in the MeWe world rather, I didn't want to compete with the Facebooks of the world. I didn't want to compete with Instagram and Twitter. MeWe's privacy-based. We don't even serve ads. So your feeds, you reach 100% of the people that are following you in your network. It looks sort of Instagram-y in a way. So did not want to compete with Facebook, did not want to compete with Twitter, and so on. So I thought, rather than trying to be a small player and spend millions of dollars in the Web 2 world competing with these guys, I will just make a left turn here and jump into the blockchain world. And so I partnered with Frank McCourt. I don't know if you know McCourt Global. Great guy, wonderful company. And originally we were Ethereum based, and then we moved over with Gavin into the Polkadot world. And that provided a real good technical environment for us. Then what happened was, like I said, that's your gateway into MeWe, but I knew we wanted to have our own token, our own currency and so forth, and that's what got us partnering with Avalanche in the Avalanche world. But we don't want to compete with the Facebooks of the world and so on. But if we have a stronghold in, like I said, almost 2 million people now on chain in this world, the effect, the market effect, the network effect will take place at some point in time. But I don't think it's going to come from the people within the blockchain world. It's going to come from the people outside of that. And that's what we think our communities, our interest groups, and then leveraging the Soshi coin is going to allow it to happen.
Just on the coin for a second, we have seen a lot of times when culture gets financialized, it sort of ruins the culture because people are now there to mine airdrops or sort of get involved. Even with Farcaster, I think the largest day they had on user growth was when they dropped, or one of the projects dropped a coin for rewarding you on usage. How do you keep the token to be really about participation and connection and community, and not have it be, I just can earn by posting?
Well, we were fortunate enough. We have great partners within MeWe. They're partners, everything from, like I said, McCourt to the Polkadot Group to Avalanche, fantastic, and to our professionals and our offshore companies, et cetera. And Black Tokenomics is our economics group that helped design our token economy within the platform. So it's very geared towards using the token, but using it for the betterment of the world in a way. We didn't look at this project as a passion project. Of course, we're capitalists as well, but it's mainly about trying to do good for the world and trying to change and take away the power and the centralized control that big tech has on you. So we wanted to decentralize it. And our coin is going to be used as a matter of, you did a wonderful thing. We want to tip you. Great content. A lot of followers coming in. We want to tip. So we want to reward good behavior. And I think that will help us in terms of it not being so much of a financial result.
All right. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you.
That was MeWe CEO Jeffrey Edel. We are going to now take a look at what's being discussed on one of the stages.
We're now on 3 nanometer and 2 nanometer designs. We're pioneering optical computing, right, which is non-transistor based, so you can get smaller than 2 nanometers because you're computing with light as opposed to atoms of energy. And we're pioneering behind the meter co-location. So this idea that I can have a latent source of energy that's not connected to any grid, and I just rock up with a containerized Bitcoin mine, and all of a sudden, I'm tapped into the Bitcoin network, and I'm tapped into global capital Bitcoin markets because I can trade Bitcoin anywhere without needing permission from anyone. It is really beautiful. This is what it looks like. This is what I used to do. I used to work in the oil field in West Texas, where I started my career. This is where I'm spending my time now. Okay, this is what crypto is about. This is the future of crypto. So let's talk about it. Investment framework. So human progress is defined by our ability to manipulate energy and atoms over space-time. Never in the history of humanity has there been energy transition. We're not going to use less energy. We're going to use more and more and more energy. We just need to get better at extracting energy. We have a giant nuclear reactor in the sky. It's called the sun. Okay, PV is photovoltaics, right, so abundantly cheap, putting solar on the grid, very cheap, battery costs coming down. So the most obvious use case for blockchains and tokens and what's happening in the Avalanche ecosystem, in my view, find, fund, and facilitate the most efficient use of these thermodynamically constrained resources at civilization scale, not just here on planet Earth, but beyond, right? China this week shipped a 2 gigawatt space data center into outer space. Like, what the fuck are we doing making casinos on chain? We have people colonizing space and building data centers. What are we doing, guys? We have a ton of money. Let's do some really cool, innovative shit that actually matters to humanity. I'm very excited about this. There's a huge opportunity here, right? Crypto is this little orange bubble. We're like $3.5 trillion asset class today. Tiny. I want crypto to be a massive asset class, but where are those inflows going to come from? It's not just going to be from people buying coins. Okay, we need to actually build things for which there's persistent fee-paying demand. Today, there are only a number of blockchains that have persistent fee-paying demand that are sustainable. Most blockchains today are fully dependent on inflation in the form of token inflation and foundations funding their development. That's not sustainable, okay? So we need to find net new use cases that bring in fee-paying demand. Credit bubble, right? All of the biggest credit firms in the world have become infrastructure credit firms. $100 billion in credit and growing. Every sovereign investing in energy and compute. Every massive company investing in energy and compute. We as an industry could be massive. What are we doing? So let's build the future. This is what I'm investing in. New protocols, orchestration and optimization layers, net new commodities and markets where we can trade them, and aggregators and marketplaces. I'm going to walk you quickly through examples of each one and how it relates to what's happening on chain. I'm going to make these slides available for download, so you don't have to take photos or try to read too fast. I like to cram a lot of information in. This is my problem. But they'll be available on my Twitter feed. You can download them, use them, copy them, do whatever you want with them. So a really cool example of a protocol is this protocol 00. They're building a new dedicated ISP. So they're taking dark fiber. It's not public internet fiber, but private fiber that's owned by high-frequency trading firms. And they're building a new ISP, a new fiber network on which we can run distributed systems much more quickly. Super cool. If you can imagine, if we can speed up connectivity, right, if we have higher bandwidth, higher throughput, we also can do disaggregated storage. All of a sudden, edge computing, edge storage becomes much more viable. So in my view, this is the first of many, but we'll see decentralized bandwidth, right, in a way that's actually viable. We'll see decentralized distributed storage. You don't need a token for this. You don't need a token. You just need to build a network, and you need capital partners who own physical infrastructure that they want to dedicate to these things. So I'm very excited about this idea that we can go lower into the OSI stack, beyond just the networking layer, and actually start to get into the hardware layer and building new routing topologies, right, that leverage some of these novel traits of how blockchains function. So we've done a lot of engineering at the networking layer. What are we doing at the hardware layer, right? Bitcoin is the only ecosystem today that has its custom hardware. The ZK ecosystem's trying, right? Inganyama and a few others are making ZPUs or dedicated ZK processing chips. What are we doing here? Let's go into those lower layers. Let's build our own dedicated hardware. Let's stop paying AWS and Google Cloud to run our compute workloads. Let's run them on crypto-native platforms and crypto-native distributed systems. Very exciting. Commodification. Okay, I get really excited about commodification. If we think about compute, right, as commodity, we started with on-prem, right? You had to run your own bare metal, very expensive, very high upfront costs. Then we had this whole era of cloud that made Web 2 possible, where all of a sudden you could one-click deploy a container, right, and run it anywhere. That made compute more of a commodity. And now DePIN and DeFi combined together are working on financing the build-out of compute capacity in new and novel ways. A bunch of projects working on that. And constructing compute networks in new and novel ways where you can consume latent compute capacity, whether that's on a computer, in a data center, potentially even on someone's phone, right? That's what EXO is trying to do with their approach. Really exciting. Optimization and orchestration. So you have all this hardware, you have all of these energy systems. How do they talk to one another, and how do you actually drive profitability? There, I think there's some really exciting opportunities. Like, blockchains are exceptional at solving complex coordination problems, right? And so this is an area where we're spending a lot of time and made a number of investments in how we actually go from single player mode, where you optimize one data center, to optimizing a whole grid or optimizing a whole set of data centers. So I think blockchains are really beautiful for aggregating, optimizing, and orchestrating using tokens or even stable coins as an incentive mechanism to drive that coordination. And then last but not least, talking really fast, you can download these, pick them apart. Aggregation of marketplaces. Daylight's a really exciting one. How do we take physical infrastructure that's really difficult to aggregate? So like power plants, right? Really simple. All of these consumer solar installations, consumer batteries, home smart thermostats, really difficult to aggregate. Cost of customer acquisition is very high. Lifetime value of a customer is very low. Pretty much every residential solar company has gone bankrupt. Why? Because the economics don't scale well. So Daylight's an interesting company. They're starting by building a platform where they're incentivizing people with their token to provide their residential energy data to the protocol. Developers, utilities, and other companies can build on top of this data set. You're effectively building a data topology. Then you can apply an AI, like an agentic overlay, to intelligently optimize demand response, so you can actually pay people to stop using power, to turn their thermostat up a few degrees, to contribute power from their battery into a local grid. And then you can actually start to see this pipeline where you start to see decentralized, deregulated energy markets emerging, where people can actually trade, right, real-time electrons, right place, right time, right amount, on-chain. So these are the things I'm excited about investing in. This is how we win. This is how we win. Energy, compute, crypto. When I started my career, energy companies were the biggest in the world. I worked at ExxonMobil, it was the biggest company in the world, $400 billion market cap. Today, that's laughable. 2025, the biggest companies in the world are semiconductor companies, energy companies, and some software companies, which are now becoming energy companies and hardware companies. Where are we going? 10 years from now, the biggest companies in the world will be energy companies, compute companies, crypto companies. Today, crypto is a tiny sliver of this. If we want to make it a big and material slice, we need to invest in energy, compute, crypto. That's it. Thank you for listening. I'll post these online.
CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from the Avalanche Summit in London. This is day 2. I am Jen Sanasi here with my co-host Sam Ewan, and we are joined backstage by MapleStory Vice President and Chief Business Officer Dominic Zhang. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Dominic, I've been talking about MapleStory for a day and a half, so
Okay.
So your presence is very much welcome
Thank you.
on our show today. Talk to me about what's been going on the last few days. MapleStory N finally launched in the Avalanche ecosystem,
Right.
something you've been building up to.
Yes.
Talk to me about what's been happening.
So the team has been building this project, MapleStory Universe, for the last more than 3 years now. Finally, we've launched with token launch and the game launch at the same time on 15th of May, which is last week. And for the last 5 days, we've seen, for the last week, we've seen a tremendous amount of results and interest from the both market as well as the game players as well. For example, we've seen 2 million NFT mints, which is the biggest in the network history, which proves the interest, tremendous interest towards the game as well. And we've seen more than 2 million worth of token inflow to our network, Avalanche L1, which is Genesis L1, our chain. Yeah, so it's really almost surreal to see it actually launched. Yeah.
I mean, you've been building a game for 3 years. We at CoinDesk have been hearing about MapleStory pretty much for 3 years, and there's been a lot of excitement around this.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more what it feels like to go from that inception moment to you're finally live, and then what do you learn after you go live of where you want to bring the game next?
So, I mean, we still believe this is only the beginning. I mean, it's a very complicated game, sophisticated game. Obviously, it took a while in order for us to come up with a new design because the project itself started not because we wanted to do something on a blockchain. We wanted to pioneer the next business model of the game company, Nexon. So, preparation has to be done well. And now finally we are live, but it's really the beginning. And what we are going to be building going forward is the ecosystem around the core game assets. So we will be inviting more builders to our ecosystem to work on diversification of our contents, more play loops in our ecosystem around the game assets.
Sam and I have been talking about, building games in Web3, thinking about what gamers want, abstracting away some of that technology. We talked about this notion and this narrative that, gamers didn't really want to hear about NFTs or hear about blockchain. I know that at MapleStory, you've been working with your community for the past 3 years leading up to this launch. Talk to me about how you worked with your community to get them comfortable with the launch and with this next iteration of MapleStory Universe.
Right. Probably I should say first that even in the Web 2 version, players already were interacting with the game assets in their own ways, trading their items in the gray markets, and last year the trading volume, transaction volume of those game assets in the existing MapleStory contents exceeded 1 billion in total. And it just proves that maybe we should bring this very strong demand to safer and more transparent environment, using the blockchain technologies. So the asset ownership of the gaming experience, the part where people value the most, is where we focused on integrating the blockchain technology. Yeah.
Let's talk about gaming for a second from a macro perspective, right? I think about gamers are either excited or angry, right? And so you have, you'll have the GTA audience that's like angry of how long they've had to wait, and then the minute a new trailer comes out, they're all excited and they're ready. Similarly, you had like the Yuga ecosystem where they were super excited about, oh, Yuga's now going to become a game company, and then fast forward to now, they're just angry at what happened, right? How do you manage a community where people are really like hanging on everything that you can say to decide whether they still want to be committed to the ecosystem, and putting that layer of financialization on top of it makes it, I think, even a little bit more complex. So how do you sort of keep them happy?
So I think that's where our team's expertise and know-how experience kick in. Nexon has been running MapleStory economy for the last 23 years. Their know-how, experience, everything, case studies exist. And we are the team that has been running the MapleStory for the last 23 years. And even the director, ex-director of the MapleStory is the CEO of our team. So with all that, communicating with the community or what kind of messages we deliver are very, very much like a DAU BAU, sorry, for our operation, live operations. So live operations is the biggest weapon that we are bringing in to the crypto world. Where we're basically bringing the real game live ops team to this industry. Yeah.
Have other game developers or game studios reached out to find out, how you did it, what you've been up to for the last 3 years to try and replicate your build and the success you've seen over the last week?
Oh yeah. Since we've launched, my phone battery started dying very quick. Because of this, lots of messages that are coming in from lots of game companies as well. A lot of companies are also looking for collaborations, which we are also open to. We're starting with the MapleStory IP, but we are even planning on bringing in other Nexon IPs. Could be Dungeon and Fighters, could be Kartrider, Crazy Arcade, Mabinogi. I don't know, so Nexon has lots of IPs that are ready to be used in the expansion of IP and create newer business models. And along with that, we are also very open to start discussing with other IPs as well. Lots of even traditional IP holders, they want to do something, but they have no idea. That's probably where our know-hows and track records so far could be helpful and even come out as a collaborations.
I think about the fact that we've been hearing about and recognizing that gaming is such a big opportunity for Web3 for years now. And Axie Infinity really kicked this off, for a lot of us. But I do think it took for the industry to have, what Gunzilla is doing with OTG, with what you guys are doing in terms of MapleStory, with Eve coming out. Finally, we're starting to see gameplay, and really like the folks who are focused on better gaming versus the kind of play to earn model.
Right.
Do you think that's what it's going to take? Just great games where you kind of forget about blockchain and you just want to play to make this industry what it can be for the blockchain?
I think it's really important to identify what you're working on. Every game company has their own strength in what kind of games depending on what kind of games they've been producing and servicing. We've basically spent a lot of time on identifying what we are going to tokenize. What makes MapleStory IP, MapleStory experience more valuable? Before working on tokenomics, we didn't even start this project to do something with blockchain. We started this project to come up with the next gen business model, and somehow our conclusion was that blockchain is inevitable. We gotta implement it. So our conclusion was that the very experience that players feel after grinding hours and hours, and the sense of reward after finally getting the item that they've been looking for so long, is something that identifies MapleStory IP as a as a valuable one. So we try to we focused on tokenizing that very moment, but obviously you cannot really tokenize the feeling, right? So we focused on the game assets, game items. That's how our tokenomics was designed. And I think for all the game companies, it's really important for them to understand whatever the IPs, whatever the games, whatever games they are working on. It's important to identify what makes that valuable, what makes it fun, and it's really important, as you said. Like we're bringing the entertainment value because we've spent so much time on identifying what makes MapleStory fun, entertaining. So I think it's, I guess, a piece of advice. I mean, I'm not in a position to give any advice, but if I give an advice to any game company that are out there, I would recommend them to spend more time on what makes your contents entertaining. Yeah.
Dominic, congratulations on the launch, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was Chief Business Officer and Vice President at MapleStory, Dominic Jang. We are going to now turn to one of the stages and see what VCs are saying about the Avalanche ecosystem.
Investors coming in, but also sophisticated liquid pools of capital who may want to come in and actually get involved in your token, but don't know, is this a real price? Is this something we actually want to step in? So transparency, can really help solve that. And whether that's on the exchanges or, whoever, we can have a broader debate. But I do think over the past couple of months, you're starting to see kind of steps in the right direction. And then hopefully with that, you get more sophisticated pools of capital coming in and not just retail. Because at the end of the day, you want longer term holders for a lot of these tokens.
I actually agree with a lot of things you said there. I'm working on something right now, a simple blog post that I think actually answers a lot of these questions. And It's really titled, "Is Any of This Shit Real?" And I think a lot of it is just, we live in a space right now where lots of money was made in the previous cycle, 2017 to 2019, seeding what is now some of the best infrastructure, Solana, Avalanche, et cetera. And as those strategies have been tried to be recycled in the current market cycle, they're bumping into a few things. One is that a lot of this stuff is vaporware. I think a good example, I got in a little bit of trouble for calling out Aleo last time on this panel, but I'll call out Movement Labs on this one. I think that's a good example of vaporware. There's a lot of these projects where they raise money at super high valuations. They launch with minimal product market fit or users, and everyone's like, well, why aren't the valuations going up? Why aren't these token values going up? And I think it's both a function of the fact that most of this stuff doesn't actually need to exist. And separately, when you look at the supply and demand dynamics of crypto right now, the amount of new tokens being launched is massive. The amount of inflation that's coming every day from staking rewards, unlocks, et cetera, is massive. And the amount of capital that would have to come in to see the same type of performance you saw in all the previous projects would just have to be a lot more significant than it is. I think a lot of this will resolve over time, and I think what really matters for the space and for VCs is actually just funding real businesses with revenue, cash flow, et cetera, that don't need a token to exist in the long run.
Yeah, so Andre, you touched on this in the beginning. VCs can't do everything for a project, right? So where do you think founders are overestimating what VCs can do for them? Like, what's that one area where founder comes to you and it's like, I can't really help you here? Like, where is that?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like binary, VCs can't help, but I'll go back to kind of my earlier point on finding product market fit. Like, I see a lot of founders, they went through the bear market after FTX collapsed and they're looking for new ideas, and they may turn to VCs like, hey, I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about that. And again, VCs can be a helpful sounding board, but I don't think they should be the ones really determining your product direction. I think it comes down to what does the market want? So staying close to the product and customers, right? What's the feedback from customers? Do they like this general direction? Is there appetite to actually pay for this product? What are the competitive dynamics? Staying very close there and drowning out the noise is super, super important, especially in crypto, right? So if you look back in 2021, there were DeFi founders who were suddenly doing NFT startups and gaming companies, right? Then you had, the bear market that washed out a lot of the vaporware, and then you start coming back and, well, now let's do something in meme coins. Oh, AI is hot. Let's explore that. Farcaster raised this crazy round. Maybe we should explore decentralized social. So, these are the conversations I'm seeing some founders have where they're constantly kind of going back and forth. I'm getting swayed by what's going on in the market, whether it's a new listing that takes place and suddenly the token price is at some crazy valuation. All of these things can be very dangerous in the long term. And there are VCs who may even push like, hey, you should pivot to XYZ vertical because it's hot. Well, why do they think it's hot? Well, maybe they can launch a token because there's some random comp on Binance listed at that level. So getting out of this kind of echo chamber, I think is really important. And again, if you go to your VCs or your board and you say, hey, I spent the last 6 months iterating on this product, here's a data-driven approach on why customers like it, why they're willing to pay for it, here's a competitive differentiation, I think VCs can be a very helpful sounding board.
Yeah, I want to answer a slightly different question. I'm sorry about that, but it comes, it's in relation to what you just said. As I see a lot of pitches, and I'm going to bring up one specifically, so hopefully the founder's not in the room, but he was actually a very smart guy. But he basically was like, listen, I'm building a verticalized, like virtuals competitor for AI agents that are going to do payments for dentists. And I said, why? Like, what is the point? I don't really understand this. And he's like, well, I've talked to some AI VCs and they're really into, kind of verticalized agentic marketplaces right now. And they believe that like, this is the future. We're going to have an agentic economy. So, okay, I understand. And then I've talked to some others and he had a payments background and they believe there's going to be agentic payments that are made. And then I dug into his background a little bit and I was like, well, what are you actually passionate about? And it had nothing to do with any of that. And the reason he was building that, as we talked longer, was because he thought that it would resonate with the VCs. And I'm telling you right now, if that is the way that you approach trying to build a business or a market, you will lose. That is not how it'll work because it is not your life mission. It is not the thing you're passionate about. You won't wake up in the morning and say, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, and I'm excited about doing that. If that's not the case, then you're not going to be successful. And so what you need us for is to be a really good confidant and to be a really good partner for you and to stick with you thick and thin and be a capital provider. What you don't need us for, and it is always going to be you moving in the wrong direction if you're trying to use us to be the person that tells you where you're supposed to be going.
And I guess focusing now more on Avalanche, no ecosystem is perfect. Avalanche has its criticisms, right? Which of these do you think hold merit, and what is the ecosystem doing to address them?
I think I'll start with this one, and I feel like I've been saying this for a long time. I feel like very much in stealth, Avalanche has been killing on the business development side. If you are very close to the ecosystem, you'll know things from Gunzilla, MapleStory, Apollo, go down the list of all the things that we've probably talked about over the last 2 days. I think one of the problems it has is really narrative in the market. Whether I'm talking to people in crypto, to potential investors in my fund, they all very much know Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. I think those kind of dominate the mind share in a lot of ways. And when you talk about Avalanche, like they have no idea like all this great stuff is going on. So I still think to this day, years later, after I probably said this last year and the year before as well, I think there's still a lot of wood to chop on having a better narrative and having the market understand like there's real things happening here. And in my opinion, like significantly more real than basically anything that's happening in any other ecosystem.
Yeah, narrative is a big one. And just to go one level deeper on that, I think if the question is, okay, how do you now convey this narrative and get people excited? If you look at what Ethereum, Solana, even Base to some extent, have done over the past couple of years, it's not hiring PR, or maybe they are in the background, but the primary way is not just hiring PR agencies and being active on Twitter. It's getting people excited about the products that are on the chain. And it's not hundreds of applications. It's 4 to 5 high-quality applications. Whether you like Pump.Fun or hate Pump.Fun, they're a massive force, right, in terms of volume and users, whatever. So you have to make it as easy as possible to use Avalanche. And a common question I get from investors or builders is, what's going on with Avalanche and how do I use the products? Right? Do I go and use the C chain? Do I go use one of the 50 L1s? How do I navigate across those different chains? I know the core wallet's doing a much better job of that today. But it's also hard to figure out what's actually going on in the ecosystem. So I think if Avalanche, and maybe it's the core team or other wallets, creates just the best discovery mechanism where, hey, I want to do stuff on Avalanche, what's going on? I download Core, and it's very easy for me to see, here are the new apps/L1s I should figure out. Obviously, all the interoperability stuff is abstracted away. I don't have to, everyone here has probably used Ethereum and Layer 2. It's like, let's learn from that. It's such a garbage UX, right? To go to different L2s, click change network, figuring out one of 4 bridges to move my assets over, hope I don't get hacked along the way. I mean, it's a mess, right? So there's a lot we can learn from and realize that doesn't really work from a marketing and user acquisition standpoint. So let's make it super easy in this core app. And then I think the second, third order effects of that is now that people can try and use these very high quality applications, builders come over because now there's a way for them to actually target specific users. And then the market and broader users and institutional investors, whoever it may be, actually understand what's going on in the ecosystem versus, I get this question probably every week, what is going on in the Avalanche ecosystem? And it's not easy for me to answer that unless you're in the weeds, which is, a problem. But I think the Avalanche and the core team are making some good strides there.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact, which is, I think there's a lot of good points that were made there. But blockchains are essentially a financial ledger, right? Like they are best used for finance. And at the core of everything that we're talking about in terms of tokenization, the core of everything that we're talking about into even some of the robust ecosystems that you have with like a MapleStory or a Gunzilla is a robust financial ecosystem or DeFi, right? And we're seeing it right now with even so on the tokenization side, Apollo is doing this thing called ACRED, and they're doing a looping strategy on Polygon.
Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you live from London where the Avalanche Summit is underway. We are at day 2 of this conference. I'm Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host Sam Ewan, and we are joined by Nonco CEO Fernando Martinez. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Now, let's just lay a foundation for our audience.
Cool.
Nonco is one of the startups in the Avalanche ecosystem. Talk to us a little bit about your vision for the future. What are you building towards?
Absolutely. So Nonco, I'll start with an intro. We are a digital asset trading firm, and we focus on two main trends. One is everything non-stablecoin related, right? So ETFs, market making, providing liquidity to funds, and all of that basically. The second one is stablecoins. We provide liquidity to companies that do remittance, cross-border payment, and trade finance. What we found is that there's no liquidity in local FX markets. So what we built with Avalanche is FX on chain.
So just talk us a little bit more about that. You said there's no liquidity in stablecoin markets. Why did that problem even spring up? And then how are you solving for it?
Perfect. So let's back up, let's say 5 years. 5 years ago, when Facebook started to interact and trying to do all these projects, obviously that got slammed down. But what we saw is that their first interaction was with local exchanges. Why? Because they have the in and out. From those 5 years, what we've seen is that there's a bunch of new stablecoins being used now. There's heaps of companies that are utilizing stablecoins, dollar-denominated stablecoins to do cross-border payments. But the amount of demand that they have right now surpasses the liquidity in local crypto exchanges. Why? Because the local crypto exchanges don't have appropriate market makers that can satisfy all of this demand. That is what we're trying to solve. We saw that in order for the stablecoin industry to continue growing, we need to provide institutional-sized liquidity towards these markets.
We're at Avalanche Summit. Curious why Avalanche was the right ecosystem to solve this problem.
That's a great question. So we started and we obviously spoke to everybody out there, right? Avalanche stood out not only because of their technology, which is phenomenal, but more so because of their vision and their business development team. They really understood our needs and handheld us throughout all of the process, right? We actually closed a deal with them, I think it was December 25th. So that gave us a lot of proof that they were going to be there no matter what time. So we chose it because of the team.
So thinking about this from a broad picture, we spoke to John from Avalanche earlier today. He was talking about their global approach, right?
Yep.
And when I think of the opportunities in stablecoins, really, I think of LATAM, I think of Mexico, I think of India, I think of Southeast Asia. There is so much stuff happening in those markets where people really need this life or death for them, right? And so what it sounds like what you're saying is, so you have all these people in need, there's not enough people in supply, right? And so what you get to do is come in and say, all right, we can work with local institutions and provide that liquidity so that they can always meet the demand.
Correct.
That happens.
So that is step one. Step two, what is FX on chain is essentially we utilized local stable coins to put all of the trade flow in a single state. So before, if you take a look at it, it's fiat against crypto. It's a bunch of operation mess. That's a reality. With FX on chain, what we're doing is we're working with local banks or exchanges that have rolled out their stablecoin in order to put it into a single state. Through smart contracts, atomic swaps, we're able to really scale these and not have our operations team focus on the counterparts, but more so the pools. That is what we're doing.
Working with local banks, local exchanges, it sounds like you may be dealing with various different jurisdictions that have various different regulations and rules to follow. How do you kind of manage that as a company of your size?
Yeah, that's a great question. So right now we are operating in Mexico, US, Brazil, and Colombia. These have the groundworks for these started 5 years ago, right? So it's really been working with the regulators and the local banks to prepare ourselves in order to meet their needs. For example, in Mexico, we do vulnerable activity reporting. In Brazil, we're working with the central bank and the regulators to be part of the upcoming sandbox. And obviously, the US is getting clearer by the day. So our approach started 5 years ago to make sure that right now we can start scaling.
So you mentioned, I want to go back to a comment you made before, which was about state.
Yep.
Right? So it sounds like you're envisioning a world in the future where there could be hundreds and hundreds of stablecoins.
Yep.
And what you're doing really is swapping them continually into the state that you control and then coming out.
Correct. So what actually happens is once a counterpart does the trade and after he settles, it will utilize the stablecoin that has the most amount of assets in the pool. Right, so it prioritizes. We are agnostic. We work with AUSD. We think they're fantastic. USDC, USDT, and on the local side, we work with a variety of them. For us, what people really want to utilize is US dollar denominated stablecoins to send them across the world. It really doesn't matter which one, right? And from a local perspective, it's the same. So what we're trying to do is put them all together so it can perform its end result.
Is there also the opportunity for yield once you do that as well?
Correct. So the pools provide yield to those, and essentially it prioritizes based on who has more. That's going to be giving a yield, and who does it give it to? To the stablecoin issuers.
All right, Fernando, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us behind the scenes.
Thank you. All right.
That was non-co-founder Fernando Martinez. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Can monetize directly in app.
But it's honest work.
Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from the Avalanche Summit in London. This is a special edition of Markets Daily, and we're joined now by VanEck Portfolio Manager Pranav Kanaday. Hello, Pranav.
Hey guys, how are you?
Great.
We're doing fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to start here. You lead VanEck's Digital Asset Alpha Fund, right?
Correct.
I said this to Sam before we came back from break.
Yeah.
Like, Pranav's going to give us the alpha. He leads the alpha fund. So let's start here. I mean, what are you looking at? What's interesting to you? I know you don't like to follow the trends.
Yeah, so we are slightly in a unique position where we can do both tokens as well as public equities in our fund. And one of the opportunities we've generally seen that's less explored by most market participants, whether it's crypto people or TradFi equity people, are just looking at public companies, internet companies, e-commerce players, and asking how much of their cost structure is interchange fees and banking fees, and to the extent they can leverage stablecoins post legislation, how much of a margin uplift can they have in their businesses, and to the extent their businesses can get a bigger multiple as a result of that, what is sort of the upside to their equities. So we've been doing that work for the last several months, and we've slightly tilted our portfolio towards that, as generally we've observed that most altcoins in the market are likely going to struggle. So we think there's better opportunity in this other pocket of the market.
Can you tell us some of the equities that you're looking at?
So unfortunately, I cannot come out on a call like this or event like this and talk about some of our holdings, but I think the way we approached it, if I were to sort of share the approach, is we kind of mapped out all the players and then generally kind of started with a belief that much of the adoption from these public companies will come from founder-led businesses where the founder is the CEO and is the sole decision maker and is really focused on optimizing the underlying business. And it's especially valuable if these businesses are either in the US and have a lot of cross-border payments, or international players where they're realizing that their local audience wants access to cheap dollars and they're finding kind of unique ways to give it to them. So we kind of mapped it all out and then ultimately asked who are the biggest winners and who are likely going to win over the long term, and we're just kind of focusing on the biggest winners today.
Are you looking at sort of small to mid-size, or you're looking at large companies? I mean,
No.
I can think of a Shopify and say, hey, when you unlock stablecoins, this is a big moment. So it's really, it's everyone.
Yeah, we're looking at some of the larger players because, I think that's where like the less explored opportunity is. If I think about what's happening in the public equity markets, much of that market has gone to passive, ETFs and index type products. And then you have a handful of sort of large hedge funds. Like I used to work at Millennium, that's a large hedge fund. Similar to Millennium, there are other players. And those folks only focus on what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. And what we're looking at here from a stablecoin perspective is something that's going to take years to play out, and it's going to dramatically change a lot of these businesses. So just extending that time horizon allows us to really focus on the big opportunities there.
You know, you said that altcoins are probably not going to do as well as they did before. If we bring it back to a more crypto-focused angle,
Yep.
what are you looking at there? Where do you see the upside when we look at what's going on specifically in crypto?
Yeah, so you know, one of the things we say in our team is stablecoins are clearly the product with some PMF here that's going to continue to work. The next thing likely that's going to come on the backs of that is tokenizing TradFi assets, bringing them on chain. Mm-hmm. The why is very simple, which is people outside the United States want dollars. We're exporting the dollars with stablecoins. The next thing is we're going to export the U.S. capital markets as well to the same people. So if you're someone in Argentina and you have a wallet and now you have a bunch of, let's just say, stables, you naturally would like to probably want some, you know, T-bills with it or maybe some U.S. equities, those types of things. So when we look at the, let's just say, the crypto universe, the token universe, we generally ask, who are going to be the winners of that theme as, you know, assets get tokenized, brought on chain, and ultimately some fintech will enable that for their local customer. But it really, what's going to be on the back end of that is the question we ask, and some of our token positions are tethered to that. The next thing we kind of think about is, we think part of the reason the altcoin market is structurally kind of in a bad place is there's not that many pipes into the space. There's not an easy way for pools of capital to access this. I believe that one day you'll have ETFs that are multi-token that will be somewhat rules-based, right? The way we have the S&P 500, which is, you know, 500 great companies that are GAAP profitable for 4 quarters, those types of rules. I think you'll have similar rules for what makes a good token that will ultimately make its way to a multi-token ETF where all the TradFi money can just buy that one product and get access. We think asking what are those types of tokens that could make their way into that product one day is a good question to ask, and then finding winners within that, because those things will likely get a lot of flows one day in the distant future.
So in the future, we're buying an index fund that has bonk in it or has dog with hat or whatever because it's fit a rule set that makes sense.
Maybe not those tokens, right? Because those things are getting fees. Yeah, as examples. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to go back to stables for a second. We've been hearing a lot about them over the last 2 days.
Yep.
Because the seat you sit in is looking at public markets as well as crypto, what do you think that the average viewer at home isn't understanding about the opportunity in stables, not 3 to 6 months, but to your point, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the line?
Yeah, so the biggest one, especially in the United States, really is explaining to people what are the benefits of stablecoins. Because we have a great financial system in the U.S. We have great fintech apps. Everyone uses Venmo or Cash App or whatever, and they're like, why do I need this stablecoin thing? But really, if you think of just generally e-commerce or even just, physical commerce in the U.S., the credit card and banking ecosystem takes around 3% of every transaction. Much of that are fees taken by the banks. And now a lot of that is for chargebacks as well as the points programs and rewards programs. But if you just think of those two components, which is chargeback and fraud risk as well as points programs, that's a very opaque landscape, right? The banks make all their margin in that opacity. So I think a lot of that could be replicated on top of stablecoins, and you can give the user the great credit card experience, but running the whole thing on chain one day, and there's meaningful cost savings to be had from that. So it's just articulating that to people is sometimes like sort of the struggle in the Western world. It makes a ton of sense for people outside the US, especially those that are just unbanked, and so this is like a new thing for them. But to the extent folks start to understand that cost savings opportunity, then they naturally ask, well, who's the loser from all this? And the answer is, well, it's the banks, right? Like if you look at any bank's like kind of income statement, their their revenue and profit center are the credit cards. So to the extent you can disrupt that via stables, I think it's a big opportunity.
I want to come back to the altcoin point, and then we got to wrap up. In this future you envision where we have ETFs that have like a basket of different altcoins, what do you think that means for the retail investor or the smaller market participant? DeFi is really, right now, the ethos of DeFi is that everyone has access. What do you think that means for smaller investors?
I don't necessarily think it means anything negative. I think, folks are going to be able to access these protocols and use them. I think it's all a function of regulatory, so that's more of a regulator question. I think what it could mean for projects and founders is if they focus on the right KPIs and they build their business the right way, they might not be getting love in the market today. I feel like a lot of deep in founders feel that way, which is they feel like, hey, I'm building some great things, generating some fees and cash flows, and my token trades at a fraction of the market cap as a meme coin. So like, why am I doing this? I've noticed that sentiment from a lot of founders. And what I tell them is, you might not be getting appreciation today because there's not a rational pool of capital or institutional capital that can make its way to very easily, but that will change in the future. So keep kind of doing what you're doing. And in this rules-based system for capital allocation, you might be a big winner one day.
Pranav, thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoy the rest of the event.
Cool. Thank you.
That was VanEck Portfolio Manager Pranav Kannade. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are at the Avalanche Summit in London. We are joined backstage now by Crucible Capital General Partner Malcolm Demurers. Hello.
Hello. It's so great to be here.
It's so great to see you. We had a little glimpse of you on stage earlier today, but we didn't see the beginning of the talk. So just take us back to an hour ago, maybe. Talk to us about what you were presenting on stage.
Yeah, I think, look, the story is, it's a very simple story, right? We are at this really interesting inflection point in human history. The last 15 years have been all about bits and bytes. Software, enterprise SaaS, right? Consumer apps dominated the world. They dominated capital markets for sure. And what we're seeing now is the shift back towards physical infrastructure because bits and bytes depend on energy and atoms, right? You need a semiconductor with power flowing through it. You need bandwidth and connectivity, and you need storage. And AI has sort of opened our eyes to this in a really massive way, but this was even happening pre-AI, right? And so we're seeing this really interesting shift where capital attention, right, both from the earliest stages of capital formation all the way through public equities, is flowing into energy, compute, physical infrastructure. And so I think there's this really interesting thing that people forget about the world of crypto. 60% of the crypto market is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin is internet money that is backed by energy and computation, right? Bitcoin pioneered behind the meter colocation. Bitcoin pioneered this model of finding lowest cost energy and turning it into this digital commodity, Bitcoin, using proof of work, right? Which is a compute intensive process. And I think Bitcoin really paved the way for the AI boom that we're seeing today. And you see that with CoreWeave, right? Going public, one of the hottest IPOs of this year, started life as a Bitcoin miner. You see that with Crusoe. Crusoe started life as a Bitcoin mining company, and they won the first 2 contracts for Stargate. You see that with even publicly listed miners who are pivoting to become AI and high performance computing companies. Galaxy IPO'd, right? A lot of the narrative there was them becoming more active in the data center space. So I think there's this really incredible moment and opportunity for crypto to play a pivotal role in how this new economy that's built around physical infrastructure and the energy to compute value chain can be brought on chain. That's what Crucible is all about. We do that through early stage venture, credit, and liquid. And yeah, so that's what I was talking about. This is my passion. It's fun.
Meltem, You're an icon. You are here because so many people always want to follow what you seem to see before them, right? And I think that people look to you to help determine what's next. When you were on stage, I heard you talk about DePIN. Yeah. You were talking about fiber. You were talking about things that I think are very non-sexy crypto, but it's like the true wires that crypto goes across. So what should our audience know about these physical systems and why crypto plays such a good role in them?
Yeah, look, I think we're in the early innings of bringing the infrastructure economy on chain. And I think we have a 5-year window to do so. I think one thing I always think about that's so frustrating about crypto, Bitcoin has built its own compute infrastructure, right? The Bitcoin network is all of these data centers, data center operators that are sort of independent and we've bootstrapped this whole economy. We've built our own financial contracts, the perpetual swap, right? It's the predominant financial contract in crypto. Didn't exist before BitMEX, right? And so I think Bitcoin has done a beautiful job building out this whole ecosystem that has its own unique model for extracting marginal energy, right? Lowest cost marginal energy, doing its own computation, has its own hardware, the ASIC, right? Has its own ecosystem of financial sort of services, but also its own unique market microstructure that existed completely outside of traditional markets. And we did that over the last 10 years. I see an opportunity for us to do that again. So we need to stop giving all of our money to Google Cloud and to Amazon and to banks and to BlackRock. They're a part of sort of the crypto institutionalization story. But I think the bigger opportunity here is we need to actually build our own cloud companies and our own hyperscalers and build our own energy companies. And so I love what Santi's doing with Inversion, right? He's looking at it through kind of this MVNO connectivity angle, but there's so much more. And I'm just trying to invest in both crypto and non-crypto companies to embed stablecoins, crypto rails into non-crypto companies, but also to get founders, entrepreneurs, and ecosystems like the Avalanche ecosystem, who we work with a lot, excited about the opportunity and really digging in to start to build around some of these opportunities. Crypto has done a great job at one thing. It is a forge for capital creation. And speculation is a great thing. And it's made a lot of people very rich. But now the question is, what do we do with this money and power that we've created in the crypto ecosystem? And I think we just have a generational opportunity to invest in energy, compute, connectivity, storage, these foundational building blocks of the digital economy, and use some of these models in crypto to distribute ownership and to change some of the unit economics. So very unsexy, so lucrative.
I think it's sexy.
It's fun. I love doing it. It's fun. And look, my goal is always, people are investing their time and energy to be here and to come to this conference and to watch me talk or to read something you write. So if people are going to invest their time and energy, I want to give them something they can walk away with, where at minimum, they walk away and they say, okay, I learned something. Mm-hmm. That's a win. But hopefully they leave inspired with an idea where they say, oh, wait a minute, I didn't think about it this way. This is something I can actually take into my business. Or, oh, this is a cool opportunity. This is a place I could invest. So hopefully people learn something at worst, and at best, they walk away with something new, right, that excites them and gives them some motivation.
Help us paint that picture for them. You talked about a 5-year window. Just tie it together for us. At the end of those 5 years, as you think about this future you're building towards, what does that look like?
Yeah. It's so funny. I was just talking to a gentleman who had pulled me aside and was talking to me about sort of his concerns with hyperscalers. They started out more on the managed services side, right? Where they would help people abstract out the complexity of managing their own compute infrastructure. Hyperscalers are starting to vertically integrate, right? Where they are now buying energy generation assets. They're partnering with IPPs or independent power producers to bring nuclear plants back online. They're investing in SMRs or small modular reactors. They are just really starting to integrate upwards in the value chain into the energy side. They also own the compute part of the value chain. They're making their own chips, right? Apple has the M1, M2 chip. Google's making its own TPUs, right? Microsoft is pioneering its own quantum computing chips. So they're moving into the hardware side of the value chain. They own distribution, right? Apple has the biggest hardware ecosystem. iOS obviously is a huge sort of distribution point. Microsoft has its ecosystem that they can distribute through Facebook. Obviously, half the planet uses a Facebook product every single day, right? So these hyperscalers are so incredibly powerful, and they're integrating upwards and downwards. And I think we are starting to sort of see this like growing concern that if we don't create a viable alternative, if we don't create a rich ecosystem of independent players here, that we will get to a world where these large companies, will run the world. And we see that these corporation states, these are multi-trillion-dollar companies. There are not many G7 economies that are bigger than Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, Google. And so, I'm a Bitcoin person first and foremost. This is year 11 in crypto for me. And what always got me so excited about Bitcoin was this idea that we could build alternative power structures, right? Now we have to be realistic. We live in a world that is luckily actually increasingly multipolar, but I think there's a really cool window of opportunity here with what's happening on the infrastructure side, the stage of maturity that crypto's in, and just how much capital and power the crypto industry has. I want to see us lean into that power and actually build things that are hard to build, but will be sort of foundational and transformative to helping crypto realize its cypherpunk potential. That might be my pipe dream, but it's exciting to me.
Meltem, we have to leave it there. A lot to think about there, I think, for our audience. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Crucible Capital General Partner, Meltem Demirors. We are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are at the Avalanche Summit. I'm Jen Sanasi here with Sam Ewan. Sam, we are winding down this program. We have 2 great interviews left. So if you're watching, stick with us. We have 2 good ones to come. But talk to me about how you're feeling about the energy in the Avalanche ecosystem.
I mean, look, we just followed up Meltem. It's hard to get more energy than she.
It is.
She is a rock star in this space. So I need to stop spinning right now. I think I'm feeling great. I'm feeling enthused. I love coming to these events, and we go to a number of them throughout the year, and seeing all of the people who are building amazing technologies, amazing ideas. I loved hearing from Hasib about how he thinks about funding founders. I thought that we got some really great content today from some of the folks we've spoken to. I'm excited after this to actually go out into the crowd and talk to the people who are actually doing the building. That's what I'm looking forward to most after this. We are in this beautiful location. We are having fun. Tell me your thoughts.
I mean, I just love the energy. Like you said, when you come to events like this, there's just this energy and this inspiration and people who are really thinking about the problems that we face every day and thinking about really smart ways to solve them. And it's just so inspiring to be around them. And so, we go to a lot of events, like you said, but I love going to them. They're inspiring. I think of ideas. I go away. I talk to other people. I'm like, maybe one day I'll be a founder. Who knows?
Jen, what would you build right now?
Oh my gosh,
if you were
don't
gonna
ask me. We don't have enough time for me to go down that
She's like,
rabbit hole.
An Apple Notes list of all the companies I would build.
Well, when Ben Schiller was on our program yesterday, we talked about his love for DePIN, and that's come up a few times. And I have to say, I am waiting for DePIN's big breakout moment at the desk, even at Consensus. We were talking about that.
Yeah.
And I really believe that DePIN, I know you do too, is solving some critical issues for people in the world outside of North America. And so I'm waiting for that big moment. When we have that big moment, I hope we're doing a program like this and we can have conversations all around DePIN like the ones that we're having today.
Yeah, what's interesting with DePIN is we spoke with Frank Mong from Helium at Consensus last week. And I loved hearing that AT&T and T-Mobile are both utilizing the Helium network as sort of fallback.
Yes.
And they've been working for years on making that a reality. And I think that it is smart software being in the right place at the right time and solving for something that didn't necessarily exist in the way that they thought about it, and the fact that it gets to reward the participants in the system. With DePIN, I keep thinking about the idea of how do we ensure that someone doesn't come up with a great idea and then Tesla or Amazon or Shopify or whomever it is comes and says, oh, we can do that at scale at a much bigger way, and then we can make the money. So I'm hoping that DePIN has a little bit of resistance towards big tech getting involved, because like you said, there's so many really cool ideas coming out of places like this at Avalanche. Those ideas bootstrapped are one thing. When you're talking about physical infrastructure, you need a lot of money to make it happen.
Yeah, you really, really do. And the AT&T example one is an interesting one. I often think about the role for intermediaries, right? This space really is disrupting many intermediaries. It's disrupting many different business models. But what we're seeing with Helium is, in one aspect of their business at least, they're working with the business that they are disrupting. And so it'll be interesting to see how that evolves if, the AT&Ts of the world start making offers that folks like Helium can't resist, or if that relationship is able to commingle until we get some more maturity in different verticals like DePIN.
Just one last thing on that, though, I think, which is, we're seeing this in finance right now. A lot of blockchain companies, a lot of decentralized exchanges are disrupting core finance. Even Pranav was talking about this too. That's where the TradFi makes its money. But what's also happening at the exact same time is that these TradFi partners are looking to find ways to work with all of those projects and blockchains, because they understand that they have to build for the future. And so I think just like they're not saying, hey, we're trying to shut you down in the way the music industry tried to do with Napster. They're saying, let's find ways to work and learn and maybe incorporate in. And maybe that is the sweet spot of kind of traditional business and blockchain-based businesses coming together in the future.
I love this. We're learning. Our audience at home is learning. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, our next guest joins us behind the scenes at the Avalanche Summit.
You can monetize directly in-app.
But it's honest work.
Welcome back to the show. We are behind the scenes at the Avalanche Summit. We're joined now by Water co-founder and president Mariam Mayati. Hey, Mariam.
Hi, Jen. Lovely to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for joining us. Like I said, we're behind the scenes. Our audience at home, though, wants a foundation. And so I know Water is bringing the $20 trillion commodities industry on chain. Talk to us about your vision, your roadmap. What's that future you're building towards?
So think about everything we talk about with adoption, right? And if you're looking at an industry that the physical flows are 20 trillion, the financial flows are closer to 120 trillion per annum just for oil, and there's a financing gap about the size of 3 trillion, which is what digital assets are, right? So if you think about adoption, going into that world and providing some of our infrastructure and some of our liquidity and some of our ways of working from crypto to bring them on chain, I think is a killer use case. I'm an ex-commodities girl. I've done that all my life. So really, most of what we do is around bringing liquidity of crypto, liquidity of alternative financiers, and the flows of giants onto an on-chain environment where we can finance, trade, track, and trace commodities at scale.
So in essence, is it a tokenization of existing commodities?
It's a tokenization and financing of existing commodities, but in new financial instruments. And where today there isn't, for example, a traded instrument that you could use even outside of an on-chain environment. And so instead of expanding the commodity market off-chain, we're expanding it on-chain.
And the audience that you're looking at are retail traders or institutional traders. How are they going to interact with Water products?
That's a great question. So my audience is actually a lot of the legacy producers, the large IOCs, the large national oil companies, the large trading houses, as well as the retail market, and the new liquidity. Think of family offices, et cetera, who today cannot play in the oil markets or in the copper markets, right? So the point of call for an individual is around exchange-traded instruments or financing into liquidity pools that have been vetted, brought together, and curated by NEO, which is the ecosystem developer on Water. The point of contact for industry and the oil producers and the copper producers is through our Water ID and Watermark product, which really basically tokenizes and makes programmatic their flows so that we can bring them into a traded environment on chain.
To do what you're talking about, you really need a solid infrastructure. And I know recently you announced a migration into the Avalanche ecosystem. Talk to me about the kind of research you did and why you ended up choosing Avalanche for the infrastructure for this.
Well, if you heard Emmen talk yesterday, he said all of the things that I'm about to tell you, right? We ran an RFP process, and we have industry co-founders who were on that journey with us. We were looking for an environment where we have sovereignty. That's really important for us as an L1. We were looking for an environment with proven technology that was infinitely scalable, with a team of individuals and humans who understood both the complexity and the opportunity of physical commodities. And when you have someone like John Nahas on the other side, you know, he comes from this world in a past iteration anyway. And this ability to really be in a decentralized environment where you're not exposed to any one individual's decisions, but a community, so that you can bring something large on chain without having it sort of ebb and flow at any individual or any organization's whim.
Do you think, and this might be the opportunity,
Yeah.
also could be a concern, we see sort of mimetic trading happen so much in crypto, right? Someone announces something at a fight in Vegas, and suddenly there's a meme coin about it, and people are investing, and it sort of can go up and down quickly. When we think of commodities, we could see how the idea of what is an always-on, 24/7 retail-driven commodities market do when you hear about a weather situation, when you hear about a power outage, a war. So is this an opportunity to be able to really, in real time, play market opportunities that might be happening quicker than you could by having to go through traditional systems?
I think of it twofold, right? If you're a financier, and I really think of retail at a slightly larger scale than an individual who would play with meme coins, right? Because it's about participating in the global supply chains and that fuel our lives. And so from that perspective, it's really about access to a commodity that has a traded index, has a real value, not an assumed value, but an actual value, and that is not available anywhere other than this environment to participate in as a financier, which is your retail investor. From a commodity trader perspective or a commodity producer perspective, absolutely. Everything you're describing around 24/7 and real price markers, eliminating a lot of the opacity of the traditional market and also eliminating the rigid contracts, right? Anyone can create a contract in an open environment, and we deeply encourage that. Now, no one might want to supply to you, and no one might want to buy from you, but how very cool to be able to innovate market instruments in real time, and if you get them right, you get them right.
Now, I know it's not the same product, but we saw with the launch of the Bitcoin and Ether ETFs in the United States that there was still a lot of education needed when it came to institutions. I'm curious to hear, how you're thinking about trust and adoption among traditional commodity traders. What's needed to scale this at the level you're talking about?
So I think of a couple of things. The first is expansion versus competition. So we work with actually a lot of the traditional institutions to expand into areas of the value chain or into new instruments that don't exist today. So we're not going and creating synthetics or replicas of what already exists. We're working with the institutions and traditional establishment to actually create instruments they don't have access to and expand the market, bring new liquidity that doesn't exist to fill a gap. And I come from a commodities world and had a privilege of launching some of the world firsts when it comes to commodity adoption of initially blockchain and later on open blockchains. And so at least we understand that world, and we've shown that we can be trusted with all of its compliance and all of its issues. It opens doors.
So predict ahead 5 years, 10 years, are all of commodities being traded as tokenized assets?
I would like to get to a place where you have digitally native trading houses, physical trading houses, who are procuring, trading, financing, and settling all of their payments and debts on chain where necessary. Where it's not necessary, there's no reason to create friction. But there isn't today a digital trading house that is native. Everyone's trying to work their way into this implementation, that implementation. So digitally native with rails to on-ramp liquidity that isn't available today, and expanding it to a market that includes accredited and KYC'd retail, alongside alternative liquidity, alongside institutions, all participating in whitelisted liquidity pools that expand the market.
Maryam, we are going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us.
It was awesome.
That was Water co-founder and president Maryam Ayati. All right, from tokenized commodities to the first state-launched stablecoin. More on that right after this. Hello and welcome back to CoinDesk Live. We are coming to you from the Avalanche Summit in London. We are joined now by the head of Wyoming Stable Token Commission, Anthony Apollo. Hello.
Hello. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Now let's just talk about what's going on in Wyoming. I said before the break, we're going to talk about the first ever state-issued stablecoin. Talk to me about the vision behind this initiative.
Absolutely. So the state of Wyoming has been working on its digital asset, blockchain, and cryptocurrency initiatives since about 2016. Over that 10-ish years, we've enacted about 50 different Web3 related bills, and that's come out of about 80 that have been put forth. So this has been an ongoing process with the Select Committee on Blockchain. That's the branch of the state legislature that puts all this forward. And it's been a very cohesive effort to build a framework very early on in the state around digital assets that is kind of front run what we've seen now happening in DC with the Genius Act and the Stable Act. We've been working on this for years.
What does it mean for a state to have a stable coin? What does it benefit the state? What does it actually benefit the residents?
Absolutely. So what we're doing with the stable token is backing it with cash and short duration treasury. So pretty standard, very conservative and low risk, but still interest bearing. That interest income that's generated from short duration treasuries comes back to the state. And this is not, a privately owned enterprise where that returns go back to shareholders. We're not buying a plane to go to all these fun crypto events every weekend. This is actually a public goods project. So on a quarterly basis, that interest income that's generated gets swept into the state school foundation fund. So that's a way that we can fund schools without having to legalize and tax recreational drugs, open up another, gambling casino or horse racing casino downtown. It's a different vector for us to bring in money to the state, which is important because Wyoming is fundamentally an oil and gas energy exportation state. So this is a way for us to diversify revenues as well.
But for the residents themselves, are they going to be going to the local store and paying in the token?
That's certainly the hope. The goal for us would be to get this not only at institutional scale, but also at the retail scale. So when you are going to your local coffee shop, you're buying a coffee down at the Paramount Cafe, and you're paying with Wyoming stable tokens, not only is that benefit for you because you're receiving, these tiny little transaction fees, but for the retailers as well, you're going to miss that 3 to 5% credit card transaction fee. We're on highly scalable networks where those transaction fees will be a fractions of a penny.
Talk to us a little bit about education and adoption, because I think there is a certain level of education you would need for the folks of Wyoming to be interacting with the stablecoin in the way that you are describing, and then a certain level of adoption that's needed, right? Like if folks are only able to spend the token within Wyoming, why not do something that's simpler, more native to them, like use dollars or a credit card, or even a privately owned stablecoin that they can use outside of the state of Wyoming?
Sure. So to be clear, with Wyoming Stable Token, it is meant to be a global product. So it's not limited to the four corners of Wyoming. It'll be domestic, it'll be international, and provided we can figure out the compliance nits of it, we will be on DeFi as well. So this is meant to be everywhere that you would see a USDC or a PYUSD along the way. For the people in the state, obviously the training and education piece will be a big part of it. We are starting that effort as we speak. Now that we have test Wyoming stable tokens on several different test nets. Now we're getting this into people's hands. We're showing them how to download digital wallets. We're getting them spun up with some of these tokens. Say, here's how you can transact. Here's how you go wallet to wallet, and obviate some of those more traditional rails by going directly peer to peer. So on top of that, we're also getting a number of pilot use cases off the ground, some that we hope will resonate within a rural community like Wyoming. One of those is called Cattle Proof. It's a USDA verified producer where they already have a platform that takes data around steer, whether that's vaccination schedules, feedlots, et cetera, puts that onto IPFS. That's already a product that exists and works and has gone through the USDA process. Our hope with that use case is to show that we can move not only the data, but value with the data. So when you sell a steer at kind of the end of its cycle, that can move in Wyoming stable tokens. You remove the 14-day-ish float that some of these ranchers have to deal with, so they can settle in seconds rather than weeks. And on top of that, it's a way just for us to reflect something that matters to the people of Wyoming. It's a big part of our state as well, from an agricultural perspective, and bring that into the kind of technical future that we see here.
Do you see an opportunity, or is it a detriment, again, without knowing exactly how it's structured, for Wyoming stablecoin to be more of a programmable money opportunity, right? What could you do where you want to reward local businesses by saying, if you pay in, you'll get a 5% break or whatever it may be, or stake with us and get X? How do you look at sort of the opportunity to sort of make it feel like it's a one Wyoming opportunity?
Sure. So a couple of things. Just about the programmability of it all, which again, it will be like other incumbent stables. So that is certainly a feature. And going back to that example of like a cattle proof, if they have an entire marketplace that we could wire up to use stable tokens instead of the old fiat rails. They've got multiple partners, and that's another way to kind of demonstrate how all this can work and have these autonomous transactions rather than, again, using the kind of old way it's been done before for efficiency's sake. On top of that, there are programs we are looking at in the state doing things like rebates or other benefits may be a little difficult for us because we are a taxpayer-funded program. Every time you would give a discount like that, that's money that's not coming back to the taxpayers. So we're trying to be a bit more creative about it. We are certainly looking at pools of funding in the state that could be deployed into Wyoming stable tokens to make the government's own operations perhaps more efficient. Things like paying state contracts with Wyoming stable tokens. And then on top of that, we are also looking to assess whether it would be compliant for us to do a yield-bearing stable token domestically. We've seen a lot of that activity go offshore, and then the programs that are available through things like the Build Fund are available to accredited investors. However, it's been something that really isn't scaled or available to most people in the US, even just beyond the state of Wyoming. But states do have some exemptions to securities laws under the SECs, and I'm not saying that we're going to do that tomorrow, but it's something that we are looking at pretty significantly, especially with all of the movement at the SEC and some of the clarification they're making around covered stable tokens, Commissioner Peirce's more recent statements about creating sandboxes, or does DLT even need to conform under this? So we're keeping a very close eye on what's happening at the federal level as well in that capacity, because that will have potentially an end benefit for the user and the state.
The last thing I want to touch on is I know you tested multiple different chains and ecosystems to launch this token, and Avalanche was one of those. What went into that testing, and where are we going to see WYST?
Sure. So we went through a pretty significant process for assessing open source technology, even ahead of our whole procurement piece, because you can't send an RFP to a blockchain. Satoshi Nakamoto is not going to respond to your RFP for Bitcoin. So we went through an entire exercise. We identified 9 candidate blockchains, and as of now, we're deployed on 7 of them, including Avalanche's Fuji testnet. So that is something that we continue to work with our partner Layer 0 and now Fireblocks on stress testing the tokens, the interoperability thereof. And just in terms of specifics that we're looking at, the confidentiality and privacy piece is quite significant for the state of Wyoming. So looking at what Avalanche has done with the Avacy solution has been part of my trip here, speaking with that team to understand how we could use a combination of zero-knowledge proofs and homomorphic encryption to protect the end user data, protect the citizens of Wyoming, but still give the commission visibility to make sure they're not being used for nefarious purposes.
So that was one of the things I thought was interesting, was the idea of a state token is in a way the opportunity for a digital surveillance. But crypto has a lot of security against that. So it sounds like you guys are leaning into the idea that privacy has to be a part of this for it to be successful.
Absolutely. So Wyoming, again, in this capacity that's been working on this legislative framework for several years, we've already had a law on the books that says you as a citizen cannot be compelled to give up your private keys in any civil or criminal proceeding. We can't compel speech as this state. That's protected under your First Amendment rights. So that's the kind of framing we're taking forward with all this. Again, we need to make sure that Wyoming stable tokens are not being used by any kind of illicit activity or by nefarious actors. But at the end of the day, goal number 1 is to preserve the privacy of Wyoming citizens.
Anthony, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that was the head of Wyoming Stable Token Commission, Anthony Apollo. We are going to take a quick break. We will be right back.
You can monetize directly in-app.
But it's honest work.
Hey everyone, you're watching CoinDesk Live from the Avalanche Summit in London. I'm Jen Sanasi, here with my co-host Sam Ewan. We've brought this program for you for the last 2 days. We've talked to a bunch of folks who are doing some really awesome things in the Avalanche ecosystem, along with a lot of folks from the Avalabs team itself. Sam, I want to tell you, when we were in Buenos Aires, you didn't have the opportunity to join us, but the three main themes that came out of that was government, grassroots, and gaming, which we've talked about here. This summit feels so much different. You know, for me, it's like tokenize everything, a big institutional push, a big push for taking what exists already in traditional finance and making it better, more efficient, and better for the end user. Talk to me a little bit about what you're taking away.
I think this last year, one of the things that's impressed me so much about Avalanche is really when they went from sort of C chain to L1s. And we've met with a lot of people who have built their own L1s. You know, when I first got into crypto, an L1 was its own project. You weren't building an L1 on top of another L1. I really am impressed with the thinking that says, hey, why not launch an L1 that does the thing I need it to do and get the support of a top tier technical team, which is what they've brought to life here. So I think that to me is one of the things that's very exciting. Just what we talked about the last 2 days and all last week at Consensus was just the rise of stablecoins and how important those are going to be in the ecosystem. I think that's a conversation we're going to be having for the next 6 to 12 months as we see that taking shape. And then the final thing I think is just the value of community. And I think, you know, not only do we see it in the people we've spoken to here, but when you go out into the main area, you just see people vibing with each other, trying to collaborate, asking each other what they're doing, learning more about how they could build with each other and get the most out of this blockchain. It reminds me of the early days of going to a Google event, you know, or the early days of a Facebook event, where you would see people who really just want to hustle, they want to build, and they want to figure out their place in the ecosystem. And so that's been exciting just to see that stuff is happening at such a level here.
Yeah, and it's not only technical support. We were talking to the folks over at Gunzilla Games yesterday, not on air, but separately. And, you know, it's like marketing support. It's introductions for valuable partnerships. And so it feels like if you're a builder in this ecosystem, I mean, I'm sure it's similar in other ecosystems too, not to say that it's only here, but there is that energy of collaborating and that energy of, you know, we're all in this together. And I want to come back to what you said about layer ones, seeing how modular they are and how they're able to enable all of these very different use cases for very different users has been really cool.
Yeah, I think, look, I want to give a hat tip to the Avalanche team. You know, this is the second year they brought us out. And, you know, between, you know, Emmen and Stanley and John and Kyle and John and the other John who's here with us today, there's a lot of folks who I think are really interested in getting the word out, and they've worked with us closely to be able to do that. And I think part of that is because they know we need as many people to know about Avalanche as they know about Bitcoin, as they know about Ethereum. They're doing the work, and I really respect that. And I think when we come out to these events, we get to see it in real life, and it really influences how I think about a lot of these projects and really the end beneficiaries. The end beneficiaries I think we heard a lot about are traditional finance, are supply chains, are, like Melton was talking about, those who are building physical infrastructure, the gamers who are starting to soften their approach to gaming. I'm living that, you know, inspired that there's some great builders in this space who are doing work that I think 5 years from now, we're going to look at and say, you know, we saw it when it was messy, and now we're seeing it when it's working.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really exciting place to be.
Yeah, it's really benefiting the users. I was just thinking while you were talking back to a time when founders were anonymous. It was hard to know who was behind projects, and it led to a lot of kind of uncertainty. There were some misdeeds that came out of that era, and getting to learn more about the folks at Avalabs, the folks who are building and bringing these builders together and thinking critically about what the next steps are, in Web3 more broadly, but also in this ecosystem was fascinating. I know you and I have we've talked about Emmen a bunch since he joined us on the show yesterday, and just hearing his background and how he's thinking about building, and hearing John and the regions he's thinking about building in, and the types of builders that they want to bring into this ecosystem really kind of solidified for me, that things are real. There are a lot of smart people behind this, and it's not just, someone in their basement behind a mask.
Absolutely. And look, and CoinDesk is the place we tell these stories. So I'm happy that we got to share that to our audience. And hopefully you at home, you at your computers, you on your phones, see something here that might interest you, and get inspired to be one of those builders. Whether on Avalanche or another chain, I think it's important for us to have more and more people who are creating, who are entrepreneurial, who are utilizing the blockchain today, because it is going to be part of our general tech ecosystem in the future. And so why not get in now?
Maybe it's going to be me. I'll tell you that founder idea later. Maybe you'll be interviewing me in years from now, I feel, though. I don't think I could spin it up that fast.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you to everyone at home for following this special programming from the Avalanche Summit in London. We were here for the past 2 days. We heard from visionaries, from builders, from people who are really doing incredible things in this industry. If you missed any of our programming, you can still see it on CoinDesk.com or on our X account. You can just rewind and watch our programming. It was both inspirational and refreshing. I am Jen Sanasi. Thank you to my co-host, Sam Ewan. Get all of your updates on CoinDesk.com, and we will see you next time.